going to teach us about parliamentary procedure. Kerry Jones, floor is yours.
Thanks, sir. How many of you spend a lot of time in meetings, either in your working life or elsewhere? Corporate executives today spend as much as 75% of their day in meetings. Many others attend civic meetings, or in Toastmasters meetings, church meetings. There are all sorts of meetings that we get involved in. And whenever any group of people get together in a meeting, especially if a decision is to be made, conflict is going to arise. And conflict can get in the way of making those decisions. So parliamentary procedure rules were developed to help groups conduct their meetings and make those decisions efficiently and fairly so that everybody has an input. They take into account the conflicting interests that develop during meetings, and they provide procedures that ensure that everything goes fairly. And they're based on a number of principles. The votes of all voting members count equally. No member votes twice, and no member's vote is counted more than once. This ensures that everybody has equal input. Absent members and members voting minority opinions have rights, and parliamentary procedure rules take into account those rights. All members have the right of free and fair debate, and the right to know the meaning of what they're voting on, and what the effect of that vote will be. The majority has the right to decide, and the minority has the right to be protected and to speak out on the issue. And the last fundamental is that parliamentary procedures facilitate the transaction of business in harmony and characterized by faith and good and fairness. So during the next 5 weeks, I'm going to present 5 sessions on parliamentary procedure. And then each about 15 minutes, and we'll talk about various aspects of it. We talk about the basic principles, learn about motions, the motions that are used most often. We're going to talk about the rules discovering debate, and we'll discuss different methods of voting during the meeting. We'll also have some opportunity to participate. We'll have some activities that involve everybody so that we can learn by doing a little bit. And that can be helpful in either 2 roles you might play in rolling meetings. You might be the presiding officer. Someday I hope all of you get the opportunity to be president of our Toastmasters club. But in other cases, you may be the presiding officer of the meeting. And they also help you learn about parliamentary procedures from the role of a member, because every member is involved in the process. As a member of the group, you need to be familiar with the different kinds of options, and so that you know how and when you can use them, because there are rules that give precedence, so that you don't get 17 things on the table at once trying to decide. We want to keep it orderly, and we need to know the rules to make sure that happens. And the more you know about parliamentary procedure, the more you can advise others in groups that you're involved with, and can advise the officers and so forth on what the rules are so that they can make the meetings and the decisions fairly. Now, legislative assemblies have had rules discovering how they did things for centuries. But most of you have heard of Robert's Rules of Order, which is the predominant set of rules that we go by today. And those have really only been around since shortly after the Civil War. A general in the Army named Henry Robert was kind of moved around the country after the Civil War. He was stationed in a lot of different places, and as he went to these different locations, he was very civic-minded, so he would attend a lot of civic meetings and different kinds of meetings, and he noticed that everybody did things differently. So one winter, when he was stationed in Milwaukee and couldn't get outside and do much, he decided to sit down and write a set of rules for conducting meetings. And in 1876, he compiled the Manual of Rules of Order, which has since become the Robert's Rules of Order. We're now on the most current edition is the Robert's Rules of Order, newly revised, the 10th edition. And it's the most commonly used basis of rules in existence today. What we're going to talk about is based on those rules on that 10th edition. But there are some other variations that can be done. I want to talk about some definitions. So the quorum. A quorum means the minimum number of people that are required to transact business. Generally in a group, it means a majority of the voting members. In some cases, organizations may require 2/3 of the members to be present to have a vote to take action. But there is some number that will be specified that you have to have that minimum number of people present in order to make a decision. If you don't have it, then you can't conduct business. There's Constitution. Constitution is the governing principles of the organization. It talks about such matters as the name, the purpose, members, officers, meetings, and the parliamentary authority that you're going to use for your meetings. In the case of Toastmasters, the Toastmasters, each club has a constitution that is the Toastmasters International Constitution that's put together by Toastmasters International and guides the conduct of Toastmasters meetings. Then there are bylaws, and these are standing rules that govern the organization's internal affairs. For example, in Toastmasters, Toastmasters has a set of rules that govern all meetings, but as you know, every meeting meets at a different time, in a different place. May have slightly different set of officers. Those are all set forth in the bylaws, what that club is going to use. For example, some clubs have a secretary and a treasurer, some clubs combine those two, and that'll be laid out in the bylaws of that organization. There are standing rules, there are details that the organization adopts that govern they're specific to them, that govern the way they do business. And then we have motions. Motions are formal proposals to take an action. Anytime the group is going to take an action, whether it involves changing the name, spending money, any kind of action that needs a group vote, a formal proposal needs to be made to take that action. And there has to be a presiding officer, and that's the meeting leader who conducts the business, makes sure that the rules are followed, and someone that carries out the duties of the presiding officer to make sure that the procedure is handled. So in handling a motion, the motion is made to take a proposed course of action, and there are generally 6 steps that take place during a small meeting. 3 of those are steps by which the motion is brought before the group, and then 3 of those steps are by which the motion is considered. And these steps are: the first motion is that the member is recognized by the presiding officer to make a motion. And then another member will second that motion. Now this doesn't have to be, that person doesn't have to be recognized. Anybody can just say, I second the motion. And more than one person can second a motion. But the reason that there's a second is to make sure that it's a question that the group really wants to discuss, that there's not only one person that wants to take this action, that there are at least another person who wants to do it. Then the chairperson or the presiding officer will formally place that motion before the group. It has been motioned and seconded that we take such and such an action. And that way, then we open the thing for debate. So the 4th step is the motion is open for debate, and that's when the discussion takes place. Generally, it starts with different people presenting their opinions on it. After the discussion, the motion is put to a vote, and then the presiding officer announces the results of the vote. So we're going to look at each of those steps in a little bit more detail. Now, the first step, to obtain recognition, when you want to make a motion, you need to be recognized by the chair. So you either stand or raise your hand, depending on the nature of the group, so that that person is entitled to the floor without interruption by other members. Now, if there's another motion pending, you can't make a motion. You can only consider one motion at a time. So the presiding officer will recognize that member by name, say, okay, Jim, would you like to make a motion? And then another member will, in step 2, another member will second that motion. So I second the motion, doesn't need to be recognized, as I said. But this merely implies that that person agrees that this is something that we ought to discuss. That doesn't necessarily mean that person agrees that we ought to take that action. This means that he thinks it's an important issue, and we ought to just have a vote on it for the group. And requiring this second helps save time. It helps us from going on and discussing a motion that nobody's going to vote for, that there's only one person interested in. So, step 3, when the determined that the motion has been made and seconded properly, it's formally placed before the group. And it's important that the chairperson, the presiding officer, state that motion as it was presented. It's not my job to amend the motion, make it be what I want it to be, but I need to clearly explain it to everybody and clearly explain what the person who made that motion wants to get across. And then I would say this motion has been made and seconded that we take such and such an action, and the meeting is now open for discussion. Now, once it's put me forward, I can't take it back. Now it's out there. It still longer belongs to the person who made that motion. It belongs to the group. And it can't be taken off the floor without the consent of the whole group. They can't take back the motion once it's been seconded and put before the group. In step 4, typically what would happen is if Jim made the motion, I would say, Jim, do you want to talk in favor of the motion? So you give the person who made the motion the opportunity to present their case of why they think we ought to do it. And then we proceed to debate. And ideally, you would go back and forth. If somebody speaks in opposition, somebody speaks in favor, opposition in favor, to give everybody an equal chance. And that will go on until everybody who wants the opportunity to speak has had that opportunity to speak. This ensures that everybody has a fair opportunity to influence the outcome of that vote. Now, if you said something and you got something else that you wanted to add to it, you're not entitled to speak until everybody else has spoken that wants to speak on it. You can't keep interrupting and keep coming back. It's to make sure that we all spread it around and everybody gets their chance. And the debate has to be confined specifically to the merits of that pending motion. You can't be talking about other things and debating whether you got to do this instead or do that instead. Do we want to do this? Step 5 is when the debate appears to have ended, and the presiding officer would say, are you ready for the question? Are we ready to take a vote? And if no member wants to be recognized and add further discussion, we will go ahead and ask for a vote. Now, there are a number of ways that you can take a vote. Take a vote by just voice, aye, all in favor, aye. Go voice vote. You can do a raise hands vote. You can have members stand. Any way that you want to, there are a number of ways that the vote can be taken. But it can do secret ballots. There's any way that you want to take the vote it can be done to make sure that things are done properly. If the voice vote isn't clear, here's many ayes as I hear no's, then I would ask for a show of hands or something else to make it clarified. And then immediately after taking the vote, the chairperson will announce the results. If it's counted, I will give the numbers of 18 in favor, 14 opposed, or I may just say that the ayes have it, the motion is carried. And then, if necessary, we talk about how we're going to implement this action, what steps need to be taken next. And in most cases, the presiding officer does not vote. I'm conducting a discussion. Now, if there's a tie vote, then I can vote and break the tie, but generally the person would not do it. If I don't vote, I could choose not to vote, and there's a tie defeats the motion. A motion can't be carried if there's a tie. So if it's 16 in favor, 15 against, and I don't want it to go, I could vote negatively, and then it would be a tie, and then it would go. So I only vote if it's going to affect the result. Now we're going to give an example of how this would work. We're just going to do a main motion. We're not going to do amendments or all those will come in later sessions. But I believe Kerry would like to make a motion. Kerry.
Mr. President, I would like to make a motion. I move that the club assess at one time special dues assessment of $10 to provide a year-end gift to the Kensington for allowing us to use the use of this room.
Do we have a second?
Mr. Chairman, I second that motion. That motion.
We're in the same round here. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we assess a one-time dues fee of $10 to provide a gift for the Kensington at the year end, providing us use this room. Kerry, would you like to speak in favor of that motion?
Yes, I would, Mr. President. We are so fortunate. They don't charge us for this room?
That's correct.
Correct.
Wow.
Or for the coffee.
Wow. That's a deal. And Warren Creek and this.
That's why we're here.
Yeah, amen. So, their generosity certainly needs to be rewarded, and just for us to provide some sense of appreciation for us using this place 51 days out of the year is certainly an excellent argument, in my belief, as to why this motion should carry.
Is there anyone who would like to speak in opposition?
Oh, come on, wait.
Right, that's what would they, would you just give a cash there if we purchase something? Is this,
The motion is incomplete since it did not name an amount.
He said $10 per person.
Oh, 10 per, okay.
10 per.
Okay, and it comes up, okay, it doesn't come out of the treasury directly, okay.
where's this point of discussion at, or was it?
We're looking for an opposition.
Well, I just want to.
Well, I'll speak against it. I think that we're a great group and we don't owe anybody anything, and we really should put our foot down and say this is ours, and I'm
We're
trying,
occupied.
and I'm trying, I'm
Hold on.
and I actually am making the point to emphasize the value of his point.
Is there any further discussion?
Well, I could suggest an opposition, which is, we should just charge the visitors that come, because it is such a privilege for them to be in this room and listen to our speeches and wonderful speaking talents, that we should charge for our services.
I think that's another.
That's another one.
Yeah, it's a different.
Oh, okay.
I would speak against this motion in order to allow for a more concise, clear motion to be made. As the question came up earlier, what are we going to do with this money? Just hand it over or find something?
Who's the Kensington?
Also, I think it should be $20 per room.
That's
That's why
that's next meeting, that's an amendment.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Jim's point was still on message or not,
No.
but I can, it isn't, or it is?
Which point?
About how we provide the money to the
No,
kids.
that would again be an amendment or some
That's
other kind of
why-
motion. The motion is
Just specifically the $10.
The motion we have is to assess a $10 fee to fund the gift. Then we can decide what the gift is, but this is just to collect.
Or how to
the money
present
for
it.
it. Motion is to collect the money for it, as a special fee assessment.
Okay, I'll speak against the motion since it is only limited to $10. I believe we ought to give a little more than that. We did not give anything last year because our treasury was very low. And in my opinion, we should up it a little bit to kind of compensate for not giving anything last year.
I want to make it clear that this motion is not binding on the book. We're not going to, this is not an actual decision. This is an example decision.
Oh,
Parliamentary.
well, then make $100 a piece then.
Again, that would be an amendment to the motion, but
Okay.
discussion of this specific motion.
Okay.
So the main motion is $10, and we will talk about amendments because they get handled a slightly different way.
What about tabling the motion for further
That's,
discussion?
again, that's a subsidiary motion. There are a lot of subsidiary motions.
Right.
I expected somebody might speak in opposition to saying that we already paid, this much to Toastmasters International, we have this much left over from our regular dues, so I don't think we should add a special assessment, but there are different kinds of arguments. That would be an argument against it. that we'd be directly void to that motion. No, I don't want to do it because we ought to give extra money. But then it would be, we've had our discussion, are we ready for a vote? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So it'd be very clear that that motion passed. Even though it was a voice vote, but, so the motion, I would then say, the motion has carried, that we assess a special one-time $10 dues to provide a gift for the Kensington. And this is the point where it says, and now we should put together a committee to decide what that gift will be, or to purchase that gift with the money that we collect. Again, that's how the procedure goes. You just have a motion, and we want to restrict the discussion to exactly what that is. In future, we'll discuss, if you don't like the $10, you want to amend it to something else, we will do that. Then we'll discuss the amendment before we vote on the motion. So it would be a separate motion in itself. But that concludes the first section on making motion. Next section will be on subsidiary motions, which will include some of the things that we talked about today.